I never read script. Elvis read script. The boys brought him script. William Morris. I had nothing to do with him picking whatever picture he wanted to make.
He slammed the door so hard the glass rattled. And in that instant, the man who built Elvis Presley's empire said the words no one ever thought they'd hear. "I'm done, Elvis. I'm walking out that door, and I'm not coming back." That line, recalled by a staff member who stood just down the hall, cut through the walls of Graceland like a gunshot. This wasn't a rumor. This was the Colonel, Elvis's iron-fisted manager, ready to quit. And if he left, everything Elvis had built could collapse overnight. But why? Why would the man who practically owned the Elvis machine threaten to walk away at the height of fame and fortune? The answer, the insider said, had nothing to do with money on paper and everything to do with the storm brewing between two men who could no longer see where business ended and loyalty began. The insider, who'd been with Elvis long enough to see the smiles fade behind the scenes, said it started like any other day of chaos. Phones ringing, assistants running, Elvis upstairs trying to rest before a show. But tension was in the air, a thick, unspoken kind that everyone in the house could feel. Something was off, they remembered. You could sense it before you even knew what was wrong. By that point, the relationship between Elvis and his manager wasn't just strained, it was toxic. On the surface, they were inseparable. The genius performer and the master promoter. But behind closed doors, the cracks were widening fast. Elvis wanted breathing room. The Colonel wanted control. Both men were stubborn, proud, and addicted to the power they held over each other. The insider described the Colonel as pacing like a storm about to break. He wasn't shouting yet, but his jaw was tight and his face was flushed. Elvis had refused to sign something, refused to go along with a tour plan that pushed him beyond exhaustion. For the Colonel, that was unthinkable. There was too much money at stake, too many deals depending on Elvis saying yes. The man who'd once promised to make Elvis untouchable was now terrified the golden goose was slipping away. He'd built this empire from a kid out of Tupelo, the insider said. He saw every no as betrayal. Inside the main office, the argument began low, measured, two professionals trying to keep control. But the volume rose like a slow boil. One voice was calm but strained, the other sharper, clipped, full of accusation. The staff nearby froze, exchanging glances but not daring to move. No one interrupted the Colonel when he was in that mood. At one point, the insider heard Elvis say something rare for him, something defiant. "I'm tired of being told what I can and can't do," he said. "I want to live my life, not just perform it." That was the spark. The Colonel's voice exploded. "You have a life because of me," he shouted. "You think these people out there love you? They love what I built." The room went silent for a second after that. The kind of silence where you can almost feel the air leave the room. Then the sound of a chair scraping across the floor. A door slamming open. Heavy footsteps. The insider peeked from the hallway and saw the Colonel standing there, suitcase half-packed, hand on the door. His face was red, his eyes wild, not angry anymore, but almost heartbroken. "I'm done, Elvis," he said again, quieter this time. "You don't need me? Fine. Let's see how far you get without me." For a moment, nobody moved. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. Because if the Colonel really left, it wouldn't just be a fight between two men. It would mean canceled shows, broken contracts, lawsuits, headlines. It would mean the end of the Presley empire. The insider swore Elvis just stood there, staring, not saying a word. You could see it in his face, a mix of shock, guilt, and disbelief. This wasn't just business anymore. This was personal. After all, this was the man who'd guided him from county fairs to Vegas, from a dusty pickup truck to world superstardom. The same man who took half of everything Elvis earned, but also made sure the world never forgot his name. "I'd never seen Elvis look that lost," the insider whispered. He wasn't angry. He looked scared. That's when the Colonel turned the knob, ready to step out for good. And as the door creaked open, the insider remembered thinking, this might be the moment the king finally loses his crown. But that's not what happened. Because just before he left, Elvis said something that froze the Colonel in place and changed the course of that day entirely. And what Elvis said next would reveal the truth about their bond, a truth that was far darker and far sadder than anyone watching from the outside could ever imagine. The thing about that blow-up is, it didn't really start that day. According to the insider, that hallway moment, the suitcase, the doorknob, the words, "I'm done, Elvis," was just the explosion at the end of a very long fuse. The real story began years earlier, in small conversations, quiet compromises, and deals Elvis never truly wanted, but signed anyway. From the very beginning, the balance of power between Elvis and his manager was tilted. On paper, it looked like a partnership. In reality, it was closer to ownership. The Colonel controlled almost everything: the tours, the movies, the TV specials, the merchandise, the publicity. If it had Elvis's name on it, chances are it passed through his manager's hands first. At first, Elvis didn't mind. He was young, overwhelmed, and grateful that someone else seemed to understand the business side. When you go from driving a truck to being chased by screaming fans in just a few months, the world starts spinning too fast to manage alone. Let the Colonel handle the contracts. Let him talk to the lawyers. Let him make the phone calls. Elvis just wanted to sing. But power has a way of growing roots. As the years went by, the roles hardened. Elvis became the product. The Colonel became the operator. And little by little, Elvis's voice in his own career started to fade. The insider remembered hearing the same sentence over and over again behind the scenes. The Colonel's already decided. New movie? The Colonel decided. Another tour? The Colonel decided. It all built toward one unavoidable collision. A private meeting where Elvis was finally prepared to push back harder than he ever had before. And the Colonel was ready to remind him exactly who held the keys to the kingdom. The insider said everyone in the house felt it coming. The pacing, the closed doors, the sharp tone in the Colonel's voice. "We knew," they said. "We just didn't know it would go that far." Because when that door shut on that particular day, it wasn't just another disagreement about dates and contracts. It was years of resentment, exhaustion, fear, and control all trapped in one room. Two men who needed each other more than they would ever admit, finally forced to face it. And when the shouting started, even the walls seemed to listen. What happened inside that room, the words that were thrown, the accusations that were made, would lead to those 6 explosive words. "I'm done, Elvis. I'm walking out." And in the next moment, behind that closed door, everything they'd built together was put on the line. By the time that meeting finally happened, nobody was calling it a meeting anymore. The insider said it felt more like a storm warning. All morning, the house was tense. The Colonel was on edge, snapping at people over small things. Coffee not hot enough, phone calls not returned fast enough. Elvis was unusually quiet, shutting himself away. saying very little. They weren't avoiding each other, but they weren't exactly seeking each other out either. Everyone knew, the insider remembered. Something was going to give. We just didn't know who it would break first. When the colonel finally asked to see Elvis, he didn't ask politely. He summoned him. It was all business. Contracts, schedules, obligations. One more conversation about one more push Elvis didn't want to make. One more demand for a man who had nothing left in the tank. From the other side of the door, the insider heard the first few minutes. The low rumble of two men trying to stay calm. The colonel started with numbers. He always started with numbers. He laid it all out like an accountant reading a verdict. How many shows were booked? How much money was already promised? How many people depended on Elvis walking out on that stage? The message was clear. This wasn't about feelings. This was about commitments. Elvis tried to explain again that he was tired, that his body hurt, that his mind wasn't right. "I need a break," he said. "I'm not a machine." For a moment, the colonel kept his voice even. He talked about responsibility, about keeping promises. Then Elvis said the thing that flipped the whole table over. "You're not listening to me. You haven't been listening for a long time." That line, the insider said, hit harder than any shout. The colonel's tone changed instantly. Now it wasn't just business, it was personal. He began reminding Elvis of everything he'd done for him, picking him up from nothing, making him a star, fighting the deals, taking the bullets, building the legend. The subtext was simple: "You owe me." But Elvis didn't back down this time. "You built the business," he said, "but you don't have to live in this body. You don't have to sing when you feel like you can barely stand." Voices rose. The insider couldn't catch every word, but the pattern was obvious. Elvis kept insisting on a pause, a slowdown, a chance to breathe. The colonel kept insisting that stopping now would destroy everything. Then came the accusation the staff had always feared they'd hear out loud. "You don't care what this is doing to me," Elvis said. "You care what it does to you." The silence after that line was thick. The insider said even the usual background noise in the house seemed to disappear. For the first time, it sounded like the colonel didn't have an immediate answer. When he finally spoke again, his voice wasn't controlled anymore. It was sharp, wounded, almost shaking with rage. "You think I don't care about you?" he snapped. "You think any of this exists without me? You think those people out there screaming your name would even know you if I hadn't put you in front of them?" He reminded Elvis of the early days, the risks he took, the deals he made, the bridges he burned for him. Then he twisted the knife. "You're not just throwing away a show, you're throwing me away." The insider heard something slam, a fist on a table, a chair kicked back. The argument had gone past contracts. This was raw ego, pride, hurt, and fear standing toe-to-toe. Elvis tried one more time to bring it back to reality. "I'm not saying I'm done forever," he said. "I'm saying I can't keep doing this." But the colonel wasn't hearing it anymore. In his mind, anything short of full obedience was betrayal. Anything other than yes was war. Then came the explosion. "If you're not going to listen," the colonel shouted, "then you don't need me. I'm done, Elvis. I quit. You want to ruin yourself? Do it without me." The insider felt their heart drop. That wasn't an idle threat anymore. It sounded final. They heard the sound of movement, drawers opening, a suitcase being dragged, quick, angry steps. The colonel wasn't just blowing off steam. He was packing. He stormed out of the room, past shocked staff, suitcase in hand, face flushed with fury. He can manage his own mess, he snapped to no one in particular. Let's see how far he gets without someone doing the thinking for him. Elvis stayed in the room, out of sight. And that worried the insider more than anything. No chasing, no yelling after him. Just silence. The colonel walked down the hall with purpose, his hand tight around the handle of the suitcase. He reached the door, grabbed the knob, and yanked it open. One step outside, and the man who had orchestrated almost every chapter of Elvis Presley's career would be gone. The machine would be headless. The empire would be leaderless. The insider said it felt like watching history tilt on a hinge. I really believe that was it, they said. I thought, this is the moment everything ends. And then, just as the colonel was about to cross that invisible line between staying and leaving, a voice floated down the hallway. It was Elvis, calm, tired, and carrying a weight that only the two of them truly understood. He said one sentence, just one, and it stopped the colonel in his tracks. The insider never forgot it, because in that single line, Elvis revealed exactly how trapped he felt, and exactly how much power this man really had over his life. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He didn't curse. From the end of the hallway, the insider heard Elvis call out with a voice that sounded more tired than angry. Just one line. No drama, no speech. If you leave, he said, there's no one left to protect me from me. The colonel stopped. Those words, the insider said, were nothing like the defiant Elvis from a few minutes earlier. There was no fight left in them, no pride, just a brutally honest confession from a man who knew exactly how close he was to the edge, and who understood that as much as he resented his manager, he also depended on him. In that moment, the power dynamic between them snapped into focus. To the world, Elvis was the king. But in that hallway, just then, he was a man admitting that without someone putting limits around him, he might not survive his own fame, his own habits, his own self-destruction. The colonel, still gripping the suitcase, froze at the door. He didn't turn around right away. The insider watched his shoulders tense, the smallest hesitation in his stance. You could almost feel the war going on inside him. Walk out and prove a point, or stay and keep control over the only client he would never be able to replace. Those words hit him where nothing else had, the insider said. Not the arguments, not the money, not the threats. Just that one truth. Elvis needed someone to say no, even when he hated hearing it. Slowly, the colonel let go of the doorknob. He didn't apologize. He didn't rush back with open arms. He simply turned around, walked past the staff without a word, and disappeared back into the room with Elvis. The suitcase stayed in the hallway like a monument to the fight that almost ended everything. For a long moment, nobody dared touch it. People stepped around it in silence, as if moving it might restart the argument or change the outcome. That lonely suitcase said what no one else wanted to admit. This whole world balanced on a very fragile line. On paper, nothing changed after that day. The shows went on. The contracts were honored. Announcements were made. Fans kept screaming. To the outside world, the machine never skipped a beat. But the insider swore you could feel a crack running through everything. Elvis trusted less. The colonel watched more closely. Every yes and no held more weight. Their bond survived, but now everyone who'd been there that day knew what it really cost. It wasn't just the day the colonel almost quit. the insider said quietly. It was the day Elvis admitted he couldn't save himself. And the saddest part, even with someone protecting him, we all know how his story ended. If you were standing in that hallway, whose side would you have been on? The man fighting to slow down, or the man determined to keep the empire alive? Let me know in the comments. Hit like if this story moved you, and subscribe for more untold chapters from Elvis's hidden life.